Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. Among his many essays, Michel de Montaigne has one that is translated into English as Same Design, Different Outcomes. And it's actually like reversed in the French. It's talking about the outcomes first, même événement. So événement, outcomes, that's a good translation of that. And then design, conseil, the design, intention, plan, what it is that somebody is attempting to do. So you can have the same goal in mind. You can decide on the same course of action, but it's going to turn out quite differently depending on things that are very often outside of our control and sometimes even outside of our thinking or knowledge about these things. And early on in the piece, because he's going to begin by bringing up two interesting cases. One of them is the Duc de Guise, and the other is the Roman Emperor Augustus Caesar. And they both are faced with similar situations. They discover there is a plot to kill them, and they have somebody who is directly involved in the plot, in their power. They tell them about it. I know that you're trying to kill me. You've joined. What is going on with this? And both of them choose the same path. Both of them have the same design, which is to show clemency or mercy. Now, Augustus does go farther and wants to make the conspirator into a friend, whereas the Duc de Guise says, hey, I don't ever want to see you again, but I'm not going to kill you. And in the future, if you're thinking about this sort of thing, maybe you should think it through a bit better. So what ends up happening? Well, Augustus succeeds, and the Duc de Guise succeeds seemingly, but then is later on assassinated. So it doesn't completely succeed. And after talking about these two cases, Montaigne is going to give us a sort of principle here. He says, so vain and worthless, frivole in French, is human wisdom. And by this, he's using the term prudence. So you could translate that as wisdom. It has to do with the wisdom that pertains to human affairs and actions and trying to achieve what's good for ourselves, which could include protecting ourselves. So human wisdom, despite all of the things that we're able to do with it, projects, counsels, precautions, human wisdom ends up not being able to determine what's going to happen. He says the outcome, the événement, remains in possession of fortune. Now, fortune is a term that was around for a long time. It goes all the way back to the Latin fortuna. And the idea there is that we could also translate it as chance. That's another aspect of it. There's a kind of complicated randomness in the universe, and we can't adequately predict it, even though we try to. When we have projects, counsels, and precautions, we are doing what we human beings do. We're trying to predict. We're trying to determine things to go our way, and we can do the best that we can at that, but we don't have the kind of wisdom that would automatically make things go our way. Now, does that mean that we should just say, screw it, there's nothing that we can do, it's entirely up to fortune? No, that would be a foolish thing to do as well. And I think you can see this in the three areas or arts of that he's using as examples. So he talks about lucky doctors who see a case successfully through, as though there was nothing in that art of theirs which can stand firm because its foundations are too fragile to hold it up by its own strength, and as though it alone needed a helping hand from fortune to make it work. And he says, you can say what you want about the art of medicine, but contrary to other people, I always despise that art when I'm well, but I never make a truce with it when I'm ill. Then I begin to hate and fear it, right? I let nature run its course. I take it for granted that nature is armed with teeth and claws to protect her from attacks launched against her, maintaining our fabric, avoiding its disintegration. And, so fortune is playing a significant role, or luck, you could call it, or a chance in the medical art. And, even today, where medical science is exponentially greater than it was in Montaigne's time. I mean, if you know much about medicine during the Renaissance, you'd say, yeah, okay, I don't know if I would trust those doctors either. But you go for an operation, you sign a document here in the United States that says, medicine is not an exact science. Things could go wrong. Hopefully they won't, but you never know, right? So medicine is like that. What about the arts? He says, in many of the surer arts where we actually do seem to be able to control things, fortune still plays a major part. He says, take the creative ecstasies which transport a poet and carry him outside himself in rapture. Why don't we attribute those to good luck? Because the poet himself confesses they surpass his own strengths and capacities. They came from without, and they're not within his own power. Same thing with orators. There's stirrings and perturbations outside the natural order which impel them beyond what they'd planned. He talks about painting. Sometimes it escapes free from the brush strokes of the painter's hand, surpassing his own conceptions and artistry and bringing him to an ecstasy of astonishment. And he says that fortune herself reveals to us even more clearly the part she plays in all works like these by the evidence of that grace and beauty which are found in them, not only without the artist's intention, but without his knowledge. The artist might not even notice what is happening, the outcome of it. And he brings up reading and writing as well. He says a competent reader can often find in another man's writings perfections other than those which the author knows he put there, and can endow them with richer senses and meaning. So, this is kind of a successful, happy outcome. We get wonderful things, whether in prose, writing, poetry, oratory, painting, pick whatever else you want. It surpasses the capacities, the plans of what it is the artist was doing. And then he talks about military matters. And he says, this is really the case in military exploits. Even in our very reflections and deliberations, certainly there has to be an element of chance and good luck mingled in them. All that our wisdom can do does not amount to much. Why? Because there's so many things that can go a different way in warfare. And so he says, when I look at the most glorious exploits in war, I think that the leaders engage in deliberation and reflection as a mere formality, surrendering the best part of their undertaking to fortune and trusting in their aid, going beyond any bounds of rational decision. And so, even in this area, you gotta be lucky or you'll be unlucky, and you can plan as much as you want, but it's not really entirely up to you. And so, this raises an issue. Well, if that's the case, then what should we do? And so, again, he's got a way of making sense of this. He says, in the state of indecision, not being able to decide between things, and perplexity, brought upon by our inability to see what is most advantageous and to choose it. So we've got a bunch of options, and we're like, well, I don't know which one is actually the best, but I have to choose something. He says this is on account of the difficulties that accompany the diverse, unforeseeable qualities and circumstances which events bring. So he's going to say, here's what you should do. The surest way, in my opinion, is to opt for the course in which is found the most honorable and conduct and justice. Now, why should we do that? Well, he gives you a couple reasons. One is, it is honorable conduct and justice. So, in a certain sense, those recommend themselves. If you've got the option to do something that's dishonorable and unjust, or to do something that's honorable and just, and you don't know which of them is actually going to turn out better, why wouldn't you pick the thing that you think is better, at least? Have a good intention. But he also says, because we doubt which is the shorter road, we should keep going straight ahead. And there's a sort of metaphor here that for a long time has been used for being honorable and just, which is to be straightforward, right? So he talks about the two examples that he brought up before. What should you do in a case where you find out people are plotting to kill you? And he says, no doubt it was fairer and nobler in the one who was offended not to act otherwise but to forgive. And it turned out badly for one of them, and it turned out well for the other. But that's no reason to condemn his good intention, right? And he also brings up a really important fact. We don't know, even if he'd taken the opposite decision, that he would have escaped the end to which his destiny called him, but he would have lost the glory of a memorable good deed. So we have two options in cases like that. Acknowledge the plot, show clemency, or you can take vengeance and punishment and live in suspicion. And why would people do that? Because they think they can control the future. If I don't do this, then they're going to definitely kill me. But if I do this, then I can be safe. And he says, history tells of many people who, faced with such fears, chose the way of hastening to greet any conspiracies with vengeance and punishment. But I can hardly see any who were well served by this remedy. Why? Well, because you have to be in what he calls continual suspicion and then distrust everybody, and this torments you. And it's not a good way to go. So he says, those who under pretext of their security teach princes so watchful a distrust, they teach them their downfall and their shame. Nothing noble is achieved without risk. You really do have to take chances in life. And one chance that you might take is, people who want to do harm to me, can I make friends, allies, or at least non-enemies of them? And so, we've got this general point. No matter what you do, you don't control the outcome. All you actually do control is your plan, your design, your intention. And so you may as well pick a good one. And he brings up a really interesting example here, which shows that it's not just the option that you pick, but also how you do it. So he said, when a boy, I saw the commander of a great city, a nobleman who is in real difficulties from the violence of an enraged populace. In order to snuff out this disturbance from the start, he decided to leave the safe place he was in and put himself in the power of that mutinous mob. Things went badly for him, and he was ignominiously killed. And so maybe the answer there is, well, he shouldn't have done that. And Montaigne says, no, that's not the right way to look at it. His error lay not in going out to them, but in adopting the way of submissiveness and weakness, wishing to appease that frenzy more by following than giving a lead, by begging than remonstrating. I believe a military bearing full of assurance and confidence, a gracious severity becoming his rank and the dignity of his office, would have succeeded better and at least more honorably and more fittingly. He could have still been killed by them. But if he'd gone out courageously and said, listen, I'm here, what are you going to do? And not tried to bargain with them or anything, maybe he would have survived. Even if he didn't survive, he would have died a better death. And Montaigne is going to bring up one more important principle about this. He says that it is true that this strong confidence can only be manifested natural and entire by those who are not terrified by the thought of death or of the worst that can happen to them in the end. To manifest it tremulously, still doubting and unsure, contributes nothing of value towards a great reconciliation. So if you want to, get your enemies to love you, you might not succeed, but if you want to make a stab at it, you've got to trust. You got to take a chance. And there's no guarantees, right? So this is a very interesting set of reflections here that Montaigne is providing. And could they apply to things more than just plots against our life? Yeah, I think this could apply to many aspects of our daily lives where we're kind of worried about things and we're tempted to overplan, to try to make things happen our way without acknowledging how much is indeed up to other people, the physical world, the weird connection of causes and, conditions and events. We can engage in projects, counsels, and precautions, but none of that is going to ultimately determine the outcome that we run into. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't pick the better ways, at least as far as we can figure them out, given our limited capacities and the vain and worthless human wisdom that we have to rely upon.